Yeah. All right. Hi, everybody. My name's Luke Meller again. Thanks for having me. Just gonna grab this. And so Pantonium is private sector. Represent the private sector here. We have a product that we sell. Unfortunately, we sell it to cities. So cities are our customer, and the product is basically it's an algorithm to control buses and take them off fixed routes. So we destroy the networks that you guys have been studying, and that's what we do. So we're disruptive, and it's a big problem, planning transit, and I think that the problem could be solved by like doubling the transit budget and just taking from other budgets, and I think we wouldn't even have to be here if they just did that. But the problem is they don't do that, and we have to stretch very thin resources across vast geographic spaces, and then you make trade-offs, and then those trade-offs impact people. And so what we're seeing now, I don't know if you read Jarrett Walker, and he's all about we need fast, frequent networks, and that's kind of what Toronto has built. But then you still have areas where they steal the buses and they reallocate them to those dense network, trunk lines. And then you have low frequency bus routes that are useless to people, especially when you have time sensitive travel. And then you have that mode share. And I think it's pretty dismal that over the last 30 years, the mode shift has not changed at all. Maybe one or a couple percentage points. And bus ridership's gone down recently. So what can we do to solve that? Well, we developed a platform. Basically, you give everybody in a town an app or a phone number or an online portal, and I'll get into some more accessibility things. And then you take the buses off the fixed routes. You tell an algorithm to figure out where the best stops are to go. Based on the demand in real time. And nobody's really done this successfully ever. So I think we were the first ones to really nail it. And the reason why this has been done before, and we've been talking about TNCs, we've been talking about MicroTransit, and the performance of TNCs and MicroTransit as transit replacements, operationally, I'm not going to talk about accessibility and equity and stuff. I'm just going to talk about the raw operational numbers. If you can get those numbers from these people, from these companies, and from the public transit agencies that are running these programs, they're pretty embarrassing. So, it's like, why don't we just replace public transit with paratransit? That's what MicroTransit is. It operates essentially like a paratransit service for the entire general population. And maybe that's a good idea if we had unlimited budgets, but it's not a good idea if your budget's constrained. So what we did instead was, let's do a MicroTransit-like solution that took the best parts of fixed route transit, which is actually, it's not really sustainable budgetary, you still lose money providing bus service, but you lose money a lot slower. Unfortunately, so Uber loses money really fast, like $1 billion a quarter. So you have like 12 billion in cash. How many quarters is that? You have to figure out how to make that sustainable. So Innisfil got Uber to do their transit, and now they're spending way more money than they would have if they had got a fixed route transit. Now that service is probably way better. I'd rather take an Uber than a fixed route bus. But I don't want to pay for it. I'd rather have SoftBank pay for it. And the same thing with Via, and Via is another MicroTransit startup, and Translock, and there's a gamut of these guys, and there's versions of these pilots being done everywhere, and they've been mentioned in a few times, but they all have the exact same performance metrics, and they're dismal. So what we did in Belleville was and I'm just going to use this nice simple success square for and we're coined this term MacroTransit. It's like a work in progress because we're looking at having a bigger buses, bigger service area, use actual optimization, not fake optimization, like matching. Like it's not about matching people with vehicles. It's actually about performing an optimization optimization event every millisecond or every few seconds And then also using StopBased. And again, this comes to accessibility, but doing door-to-door is great for paratransit. You need to do door-to-door for paratransit, but for conventional transit, you can't do door-to-door and be efficient. It's just impossible. So don't even think about doing door-to-door ever, unless it's for somebody who absolutely needs it, like if they're in a wheelchair or if they need that extra service. So keep those people in paratransit. Definitely give paratransit more money, but anything conventional, do it stop-based, or else, why even bother? So we did this in Belleville, Ontario, and a few other towns. We had some good numbers. Mainly, what I want to talk about is the increase in the service area, but the passengers per hour is also important because that's basically, on average, every bus in North America transports 10 people per hour. So if everyone bought Pantonium and we got that number up to 20 to 30 per hour, suddenly you need a lot fewer buses to transport significantly more people. And that might help and deliver a lot of value for society. So this is there was a fixed route that we replaced, and you can see the outlines here on the screen. It's not the greatest, but we just scrapped that fixed route and let the buses roam the city based on where the algorithm told them to go, and collected all that data, and we can see the hot spots of demand. And I have a much better image here. This is the OD pairs that we got. And I want to tell another thing: if you're designing a service area, it needs to have useful destinations and useful origin points. So a lot of MicroTransit pilots, we're going to do a first last mile solution in the middle of nowhere, podunk, end of the line. So this, we just built this suburb 2 years ago. There's no transit service there. Half the houses are empty, and there's a rail line, maybe a 15-minute drive, and we'll box that area, build a MicroTransit solution. We'll buy it from our competitors, and then it sucks, and nobody uses it. And, Calgary did this. LA did this in 3 locations, and they all sucked. Nobody used them. So what we do, we have what we call the Walmart principle. And so this is Walmart in Belleville. And notice how everything's flowing to and from Walmart. And that's because that's the useful destination. And it has more traffic than the actual transit station itself. So if you're going to build a service area, have a Walmart in it or a Walmart equivalent, and it will be a healthy service area.
Can you go back and just point out where the fixed route was?
Okay, yeah. So the fixed route, it didn't even go to Walmart, but essentially it did. Yeah, it orbited the whole city. So this is, imagine if this is Toronto. Belleville's kind of like Toronto in that it's on the lake. It's east-west. The main street, this is like the Yonge Street equivalent, and it's basically the same kind of dismal Yonge Street. And basically, this is the employment area. These are factories. They travel down here. It went down. The college is over here, another hot spot, and went up, and then went around. So it kind of missed the entire middle of the city. And again, and I just want to note, this is the nighttime bus route. So Belleville's daytime bus route is great, and I know somebody brought up that there's not a lot of nighttime pilots going on. Well, this is one of them for on-demand transit. And pickups, drop-offs, what we've found is that there's 2 main activities being done on the bus, and Stephen is working with us to identify this at a proper level. We haven't done any real research. This has only been running for a year, so early days. But what we found is people use it for shopping and they use it for employment, and it's pretty much cut in half. So 50% are doing it for shopping and random infrequent trips. The other half are doing it, basically using this as a commute replacement. And we can see this is where the factories are, and that's where the hotspot of demand is, and then also Walmart. Ryerson did a whole research paper on this, so I'm not going to try to explain that all here. But here's the trip patterns. You notice it spikes at around 11 and 12 at night. So these are everybody coming home from their shifts, getting on the bus and then being spread out all over the town. Also, it's very popular on the weekends, and I think that's just because there's more service hours allocated to it on the weekends, so it has more trips being done. But also, Sunday service is really poor in a lot of cities, and I think these types of on-demand solutions can really help for those Sunday and Saturday services when, sometimes the buses just stop running after 6 p.m. And then here's just a shock and awe of data, and I think some things that you guys will find interesting. Hope I have it here. So 71% of trips booked by the app. So that kind of corresponds with the population where like 70% of people are comfortable with apps and then 30% of people are not comfortable with apps. And then 7% called in. So they just we just gave them the paratransit organization's number and just said, these people are used to booking trips already. They can book trips through a phone and talk to somebody who knows what they're doing. And then this is an interesting statistic is walk-on riders. So how do you manage walk-on riders? You give the app to the driver and let the driver book the trip for the rider. Because again, we want to treat this like a public transit service. So even if one person's waiting at a bus stop, the bus pulls up and then another person walks beside that person and wants to get on the bus, are you going to deny that person a ride? Like, no, you have to take those ad hoc riders. So having the drivers be able to book trips for the riders helps smooth things out. And then again, this is what I mentioned before, the 50-50 split between infrequent users who are kind of using it, who knows what they're doing. We will know soon, hopefully, but I'm assuming they're doing it for shopping or going to the bar or something. But then the other half are using it for frequent trips to work. And what the conclusion from the Ryerson piece was that you couldn't address both of these populations with a fixed route. You could send a nice regular bus with high frequency to get all those people to work. If you had unlimited budget, maybe you could do both. But if you have a constrained budget like Belleville had, you would either have to make it very inconvenient for one of those groups. So what we see on-demand transit is it's not a be-all, end-all. You're never going to replace high frequency. We're not going to scrap all of Toronto's bus routes because some of them are moving more people than Belleville moves in a day. But for the bus routes that are very low performance, you could take those buses, run them on demand in a very large service area and help grab those infrequent travelers because who maybe they're not trying to get to the central business district. Maybe they're trying to get to an appointment somewhere random at a bus stop, or they have to, and they don't want to make like 5 or 6 transfers on buses which you have to do if you have these kind of network-based fixed route systems. You could just have buses doing point-to-point transportation with no transfers, and have the productivity to make them kind of economical. So that's our vision that we're trying to deploy and scale up. And that's it. Hopefully I didn't go over time.
Thank you, Luke. Our next speaker is Andrew Miller from Sidewalk Labs. Just a quick show of hands, how many of you in the room have heard of Sidewalk Labs? Yes, pretty much everyone. So Andrew's going to talk